Welcome to another episode of II Captain. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one of the most innovative and impactful AI projects that WWT has undertaken in its 30-plus year history, the creation of WWT GPT, a powerful tool that enables our sales force to access relevant information, insights, and recommendations using natural language queries and conversational interactions. We'll share origins of the tool, the development process, the challenges they faced, and the integration of additional data sources like meeting transcripts. It's a rare opportunity to get an insider's view of how WWT builds AI solutions that deliver value to our customers and partners. Let's get started.
WWT presents II Captain.
And I think today we're going to be talking about some of the origins of how we built WWT GPT.
Okay.
I don't think I was involved day one, but you were, right?
Yeah, I was.
So I know some of it started off as a bit of an experiment, and then it turned into a real application that we launched to our sales force back in February of this year with our sales kickoff event. So maybe let's rewind back to, what was it, maybe June of last year?
Maybe even a little earlier than that, but I think that it began in earnest probably in the June timeframe. It was everything had kind of blown up at that point, and there wasn't a whole lot of information, at least the way I recollect it, around like how would you build your own AI type of assistant. So it was really like, can we start to just kind of string things together and make it answer questions? I think RAG was also starting to come through. It was the whole chat with your PDFs type of thing.
Yeah.
Everybody had one. So it was like, how do we start to put these pieces together? And so I reached out to our one of our lead directors over development and said, hey, can we start to mess around with that and build some sort of prototype for it?
Yeah, and Brian's been on the podcast before.
That's right. Yeah.
So he was instrumental in getting started there. And at the time, RAG was probably out there, but probably not as a familiar term as it is today.
It just started, because a lot of it was more about fine tuning the models in order to inject the information. So it was interesting. It was also harder to understand as well. And one of the first things that we did try to do was just use some of the out-of-box Azure capabilities for that, and we were getting some mixed results at that point in time. I think because they were just in their infancy as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that's kind of unique to what we're doing, at that time and still today, is this idea of RBAC on top of the data, right? And so when you think about RAG and a lot of the out-of-the-box RAG solutions, they're often built to, dynamically ingest content from a website or from a group of PDFs in a folder, something like that. And in our case, we have a lot of content hosted on wwt.com.
Right.
We wanted that content to be basically powering this engine, but also use a lot of the security that we had built into that to be able to give people access to the data and the content that they needed, and not, the content that's a little bit more secure or, focusing for specific customers, things like that.
Right. Yeah. I do. We started with wwt.com because, in a sense, it was easier. There's not as much role-based access control there. But to your point, especially as we're headed towards rolling that out for external users, customers, we would want to make sure that internal content that there is some on there is not surfaced through, and so that becomes a challenging point of how do you actually trust the AI system in order to still enforce those RBAC rules.
Yeah, and I don't quite remember how they were doing it at first. I'm assuming that you guys were maybe just calling some of the APIs that are out there.
Calling one API that was extracting all of the content, and then we were ingesting the content into a vector database.
Yeah. And I remember when I got involved, there wasn't really a data pipeline. It was kind of a single snapshot in time, that somebody, called that API, dumped a bunch of data into the vector database, and then it started to get, real, right? Where we needed, we have data from, say July, and now it's August, and we actually need a pipeline there. So that was when, I got more involved with it and started to build some of the data pipelines. And we had at first, started experimenting with Kafka. So thinking about,
data streaming.
how do we stream this data out, into a vector database, basically.
Right.
So at least here, Kafka was a newer technology. We didn't have kind of all of the architecture set up to be able to, stream it and then receive it. So we kind of quickly pivoted towards Azure Blob Storage. And basically, at the time of creation, so when a piece of content is published, we stream it out to Azure Blob Storage, using that as a staging area. The nice thing is a lot of these Azure tools today are built around blob storage, right? So you can use that as a common pattern with a lot of applications. But I think in our case, again, going back to the RBAC concept, we're basically pushing in at that time, these JSON documents that had content, but then also attributes that indicated, the different roles and security that content required. And so feeding that into the vector database took, a little bit of, custom code in order to create extra columns just to make sure that we were, filtering the data appropriately.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting in all that too, just thinking back, a long time ago, but a lot of the problems and a lot of the things that we're solving here are similar to what enterprises were doing with enterprise search. And you probably also dealt with that with wwt.com. But it's how do you get good relevancy out of your search results, which means that you do have to look at how you've structured that. RBAC, also, you don't want search results to show things that people shouldn't be able to see, even if it's just the initial tag of it and they click and they can't get to it. You're still you don't want them to be aware of it. So there are, I think we've talked about this a little bit, the patterns of the things that we're solving for today are similar to the patterns of database management systems or enterprise search. It's just that the technology is new and different, and there's just figuring out how to apply those patterns in a similar way that still also account for the differences that the LLMs throw into the mix as well.
Yeah, and maybe this technology has been around longer than I'm giving it credit for, but at least for me, what this has opened up, like moving towards the vector database approach, is this new world of semantic search. And even more than semantic, there's this hybrid search approach that we're using today, which is a mix of that keyword-based search that companies have been doing forever with leucine indexes, with now this semantic search that allows you to search based on concepts rather than just the words themselves. And that's a key component to any RAG architecture, right? And it's one of those things that now, like in hindsight, taking a step back a little bit and looking at our search capabilities across wwt.com, we're realizing that there's an opportunity to bring a lot of those concepts directly into our website.
Right.
And not just, ship the data out, because that's kind of what we've been doing, like building these data pipelines, shipping the data out, allowing, that to be indexed separately. And we augmented that data with a lot of additional data sources, right? And maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Because when we think about our chatbot, which is currently we call it WWT GPT. We're in the process of rebranding that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But when we think about that, it's not just trained on the data from our website, but we actually have additional data sources in the mix today. Right. And so one of the first additional data sources that we added was meeting transcripts, right? Video transcripts, meeting transcripts, things like that. And so as we host content and host events and videos, on our website, we are now integrating with the video provider to pull the transcript in, feed the transcript out into that vector database. And before we put it into the vector database, we actually summarize it. So we're taking the context of that transcript, summarizing it down, and indexing it. And that's an example where, we don't have that capability today within our search.
Right.
We can do that within AI, within our chatbot, but we can't do that on our website today. So that's one of the realizations that we had, that like maybe there's a different way to go about this, and an opportunity to refactor our search using the same concepts that we've been using now for the past 6-7 months, right? With our chatbot, and really enabling semantic search and these additional data sources all within WWT.com.
Actually, just as a tangent to that, but one of the discussion points and that kind of aha moment with that is like, every Friday there's this AT SM call where the teams that are in those particular areas of technology are presenting out to the rest of the company what's going on in their space as part of an educational session. And
that's a sales call, but it's a technology sales call.
Right.
Yep.
It's a good technologically functional call.
Mm-hmm.
It basically was a content factory in a way. It was, there's a lot of good content, and what we found was, in order to get that, we needed to go back to the transcripts. And one of the things we've even talked about further is applying AI to actually create summary articles out of that to help augment the overall production of content. So it's just one of those, when you don't live in it and you're not trying to solve for a particular problem, those things happen, and they're a treasure trove of information. And now we start to see, as we apply that in this particular space, where you can actually use generative AI, to get the transcripts and to better search, but also actually produce content that actually helps that team, which in essence solves time, because they've already put time into creating the content. So now you can just output it in a different format.
Absolutely. And when you look at some of these third-party AI tools, right? So Microsoft Copilot as an example, that video summarization and chat capability stands out to a lot of people as one of the most effective ways of using generative AI.
Right, for sure. That's the number one thing everybody, when we've released Copilot into the enterprise, has been like, we love that feature. So,
And so that kind of speaks to, within WT.com, taking the APIs that we're already, building and using around search, enabling that with these additional data sources like transcripts, adding in semantic and hybrid search into that mix. And now all of a sudden, like, you're able to use the same API to power your AI, power your website, power your mobile app, and then you have a pattern that's easy for teams to adopt, right?
Right.
Because I think what had been happening, and not to disparage any of this architecture, but we have, whenever you're shipping data out through a data pipeline, there's trouble that happens, right? Like, you have to troubleshoot some of these connectivity issues, and sometimes the data format changes, and now you've got multiple places where you're looking for issues and potential mismatches of those data attributes. I'm a big fan of kind of centralizing as much as possible, all of the data access into the API itself, and then promoting the reuse of those APIs.
Yeah, I mean, goes back to, it's a pattern. Microservices, you want as the owner of WWT.com, from an application standpoint, all the business logic that goes into that.
Absolutely.
As soon as we started, and that was even an early discussion on our side too, is we didn't want to start going to every single application owner and say, give me, bypass the business logic, go to the content, give me the content, and then we'll figure it out over on this side.
Yeah.
It was certainly faster in the proof of concept phase, but as we've settled on it, it would be better. And as you've outlined, you're going to be able to improve the actual product experience of WWT.com.
Yeah.
And we're also able then to take advantage of that through a microservice from WWT GPT to call that and get the benefits that we were trying to build all in one place. But that was going to become very brittle very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking about some of the overarching concerns, for any of these kind of architectures where you're building a chatbot, it's got a lot of information in it. Our goal is to take this and not only move it into kind of more of an assistant mindset, but be able to expose this assistant to our customers and partners through WWT.com. Right. And so when we think about that, we think about the related costs, right? When we think about performance, right, as being concerns there. It's pretty amazing to see how the costs have changed, like even in recent weeks, right? So moving from GPT-4 to 4.0, for example, like you're talking about, in some cases, maybe 20% of the cost of GPT-4,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Claude 3.5 just came out, right? We're seeing the same thing there. And now there's competition in the marketplace because GPT-4 is no longer, the de facto standard for like text summarization, right?
Yeah.
So competition is breeding, maybe healthier costs, for people like us. But then also we're seeing huge increases in performance as well.
Right. Yep.
And performance, not only from the LLM that's being used to summarize the text, but also, within our RAG architecture today, we have what's called a re-ranker.
Yep.
And so the re-ranker is able to, take a broad, query, similarity search query from our vector database, and then really refine it down to these are the actual best sources of information that match this prompt. And, I think at the time when we first implemented it, it didn't have access to GPUs, it's one of the slowest parts of our architecture right now. But, with some of the experiments that we're doing, looking at, cloud-based re-rankers and then re-rankers that are, kind of tied in directly with GPUs, it's allowing us to, provide better speeds to the users.
And to go back to your original point, being able to actually leverage conventional search with some of the semantic capabilities could also be added in, not maybe solely, but as an initial case to help with that as well. And that's what we're seeing too, is people were all trying to solve the problem purely with LLMs and vector and re-rank, and then it was like, well, wait a second, we've got good search results in some of these other spaces, so maybe we can infer what the user's intent is and determine if it's best to use semantic search or to use vector, or as you said earlier, a hybrid of those things, and that just improves performance, improves accuracy. So it just opens up a greater palette of opportunities.
The other thing it does that we're starting to experiment with is like we've already got, and I think a lot of enterprises probably have something similar within our enterprise search, the capability of focusing the search results around your recommendations, right? So we are keeping track of, in our case, the topics that you're frequenting, the topics that you're following, and then we're using that to influence the weighting of the search results. And so now when you think about, using that same concept for AI, within a RAG architecture, it's not just about giving, the general answer, but it's an answer that's maybe more tailored to your persona, right? And so part of that is the set of recommendations. The other part of that is, feeding the AI and providing, whether it's a system prompt or, something that's fed into the context in a different way, giving it information about you, right? So it understands more about the types of things that you like and, what your role is in the organization. And it can start to use language that is tailored to, you as a VP of IT or, Brian as, someone in marketing. It understands that there are certain terms that you would connect with that maybe, Brian might not. And so trying to make sure that your AI is tailored to your people.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty incredible. It was adaptive persona. We even found that in a different case, right, with the RFP generator, that when for different segments you wanted to have it adopt a different persona in order to analyze first and then produce. And then maybe at the end of that, just take on a overarching persona to then assimilate all of that content together. So pretty powerful concepts, both for personalization as well as for applying in the crunching of the content and then generating things. Yeah,
absolutely. And we've been doing a lot of analysis on how people are using WT GPT, and as part of that, we did a roundtable session, getting user feedback directly. And we're getting questions about like industries, because at Worldwide we service a lot of different industries, and industries have different terms that are unique to them, right? So maybe providing, whether it's part of your persona or if you're part of our sales team and maybe you're servicing multiple industries, providing a prompt library that is industry specific to help people understand, or help the AI understand that in this case, I'm asking about, healthcare and healthcare related technologies, so it can respond back with, some of the terms that are specific to that area.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by SentinelOne. Protect your organization from cyber threats with the world's most advanced AI-powered cybersecurity platform. With SentinelOne, you can secure tomorrow.
Maybe we should talk about the PTUs. Yeah,
because just talk about dedicated throughput, not give them a advertisement.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, so when we think about like maybe what we could have done differently, knowing what we know today, what jumps out to you?
We were making a conscious effort to lean into figure stuff out. So we knew going into that we were going to be making a lot more mistakes or probably a what could have been, should have been type of thing. So I don't think I regret that necessarily, because in the end it was to test the things that we're reading and seeing and hearing with reality. And certainly from a go-to-market perspective, as we engage with customers, we definitely lean heavily on what's practical. What can you actually do? So from that perspective, I think I don't regret those things. Certainly, though, it is one of those, hindsight, you look back, it's like, well, we could have done a lot of these things different, or maybe if we'd waited, it wouldn't have taken those long. I think some of the things there were, we got the WWT GPT working. We'd kind of sent it out to a small group of folks in order to kind of, get feedback, et cetera. And feedback was mixed. I mean, there were complete sentences and things like that. It was going off the rails, but a lot of times we were finding, actually the earlier ones where a lot of people were asking questions about other people.
Other people, yeah.
And we'd never even put other people content in. Yeah. So there was extraneous people information already embedded in some of the articles. And so it was coming back some pretty funny amalgamations of answers for that. So we knew in that regard, kind of going back to the earlier conversation, that we needed to set up a content pipeline to get, that type of profile information in order to answer those questions. So that would probably be one, is setting up a better feedback loop on what are the types of questions where we're getting, thumbs down on types, that type of thing, and are there broad brushstroke categories that we could tackle in order to achieve those types of things. Yeah,
or maybe let's talk about like the feedback loop there, because rolling out a tool like this, like you definitely need feedback loops. I think in our case, there's 3 I can think of. One is just like, human interaction, right? Like making sure that we're talking to the people that are using it. Like we have a set of super users that are out there using the tool and providing feedback on a regular basis. The second one I can think of is, in the tool itself, building a way to provide feedback, right? And for us, it's thumbs up, thumbs down, hopefully with some comments, that indicate what's wrong or, what they didn't like about the answer. And that's not necessarily used to, automatically tune the tool, right? It's something that we're using for analysis purposes, right? So we have, a weekly cadence where we're looking at that feedback to understand, whether we're trending in the right direction or not, and I think to your point about the early days, there was a lot of feedback coming out of that system indicating that I'm asking it about this person and it's telling me that this person is, in one example, it was saying that my boss at the time was a pastor, and he's not. So we had to fix all of that, and really make sure that the AI understood that it should not try to make connections just using somebody's name. And in that case, it was trying to make connections using somebody's first name, and saying, "Oh, I have 2 Tims here, and so they must be the same person," right? So just making sure the AI knows that. And then the third way of, evaluating success and making sure that the system is working the way we expect is through automation. And so our management consulting team did a great job of building out, an evaluation layer that's using a sampling of 100 different prompts and just using the AI to evaluate the responses coming back. So that's one of the cool things about using these LLMs, is that rather than, providing, a certain answer that you're expecting and saying, well, did it match this? You can actually use the LLM to grade itself, right? To kind of check its own work and evaluate it against, the accuracy that you're expecting.
Yeah. I think that has been helpful. And you mentioned earlier that we had a feedback session. I really like those. So especially when you can get a group of vocal, active users, because you never know quite what you're going to get, but you're also reinforcing within them that, one active user might not have realized how to do something that another user had been doing. And so that actually just starts to create more activity in that space. But then it helps us to hone in on some of those use cases that maybe when they would say it'd be great if we could also do X. So you're already building off of a user base that's actively using the tool versus trying to create new features or capabilities to attract net new. And you want to do both, but this way you're building upon something and starting to build momentum through that. So I think that's been really helpful.
And some of the best feedback I've heard is from people that are new to the company, where they feel like they're accessing this like treasure trove of data, that would be similar to talking to somebody with, decades of experience here, right? That they can just kind of ask the AI all those questions that they were afraid to ask maybe their boss, and have the AI respond with what it knows.
Yeah. I think the other thing, I guess, going back to the original question, right, what could we do differently? There were, I guess, two kinds of things. One, as we mentioned, we were trying to build this WWT GPT just to test case, how does it all work, and it was fairly rigid, for lack of a better term. Not rigid. We needed to just basically make sure all the pieces fit together. Yeah. But we did fortunately happen to run across another team that was working on a similar type of use case, and so with any kind of new technology, there tends to be a little bit of chaos, but we were able to get those teams together and blend the best of modular things. So, we had a drop down so we could kind of switch tracks to different types of chatbots and things. And that way it sped up the ability to experiment with things without tearing things down and building things back up, or target. I could send out, hey, check out this chatbot, and we just have it to 1 for you, but maybe 2 for somebody else. So those types of things helped speed up the experimentation process, since that you mentioned automation on the feedback loop, but even just the iterations, the ability to do that more quickly was a big benefit.
Yeah, and I think the tool that they were building is most similar to, if you look at OpenAI, you can create your own custom GPTs. So along those lines, where it allowed you to abstract not only which model you were using, but also create different system messages and different contexts. So is this a chat, or is this something where it's like a single, question and answer experience? And then what we've been doing recently is like plugging in, API calls into that. So using the same front end, but under the hood, building out like a kind of a new approach to this that's heavy on, agents and function calling. But then using that same modular design, you can, create a new flow that you're directing it to these new API calls that we're using. Yeah. So it's pretty cool, and it's been helpful. It helped my team get started with AI, right? Like we did a hackathon back in, I think it was July of last year, and we used that LLM API and the WT GPT front end to kind of get started. And I think coming out of that, we had 3 different projects go to production, within a month or so after the hackathon.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's another good one that we stumbled upon in this. We have a culture of innovation and doing hackathons, and so being able to start aligning that to a theme. There can be a little bit of chafing around. Don't tell me what to do in the innovation space, but if it was like we do want everybody kind of exploring and leaning into that. In some cases, we've even rebranded them to learnathons and saying, hey, we want you to use this time to build up skills in this space, because it's going to be important across whatever you're doing, whether you're a full stack developer or maybe you're in Oracle or Salesforce or whatnot. You need to learn the capabilities and then how they play into your space. But I think that was one that, like you said, we started to bear fruit. If it was, hey, only this group should be focused on the experimenting and everybody else keep doing what you're doing, we would have missed out on other learnings through that as well, that then could be factored into the overall overarching approach. Yeah, absolutely.
I guess just to kind of wrap up the section on what we could have done differently, one of the areas that jumps out to me is, I don't know what we'd call it, maybe dedicated compute.
Oh, yes.
For LLMs, versus a pay-as-you-go kind of model. And I know the intention there was, as we release this to our, sales department in our sales kickoff back in February, we were concerned about performance. We were concerned about scale, right? We're now taking it from a group of maybe 20 to 30 users out to, 2,000 users.
Right.
And so in order to do that and have some, assurance that this isn't going to fall apart, we purchased some dedicated compute out in the cloud to host GPT-4. Very expensive.
Yes.
And in hindsight, I think what we realized over the course of a couple months is we weren't really tapping into the benefits of it.
Right.
I don't know if you have any specific thoughts there.
I mean, it is one of those. It's now there's more capacity, pay-as-you-go capacity to begin with, so it's probably one where we don't need it as much. There also, as you said, we were going to launch almost like Black Friday of, hey, everybody, here's a tool, and we were concerned the excitement would yield everybody hitting it and then overwhelming the system. Mm-hmm. So it was a bit of literally a perfect definition of why you want cloud compute, so that you can scale that part for a period of time without locking it in and saying, now we're stuck with this forever. So as you said, we've since gotten rid of the dedicated throughput because our day-to-day usage doesn't require it. I'd say going back, I still would have done it again in the same circumstances, just because we wanted to guarantee a good functional experience, or at least a performance experience. But I think what we would ideally we'd be able to control more of the rollout so that they're rolling, and then we don't need that as well. Yeah,
and we're at the point where we're starting kind of down a new path. We've got this objective to kind of move towards an assistant-based architecture, and as part of that, I mentioned earlier that we're rebranding the tool, right?
Yeah.
So the new name is Adam, right? And Adam is going to be the worldwide assistant that is hopefully everywhere you want it to be, right? And so when we think about an assistant context versus just a chatbot, the idea here is that Adam doesn't just answer questions, but it can carry out tasks.
Right.
And so if you're a customer, carrying out a task might be something as simple as, creating a support ticket. But it could be as complicated as, creating a quote or, doing things down the road that allow a customer to interact with, some of the transactional aspects of the business that we do with them.
Right. So, I think the marketing team in particular did which is right in their wheelhouse, but did a great job of going back and looking at the ATC, the Advanced Technology Center, and the imagery there, and there is an ATOM, so ATOM. Yeah. And then saying that would be a good kind of extension of what the intent of this is. And then I think that also then helps reinforce, even for us at WWT, where you said a new employee coming in can now use ATOM as an assistant. So it just reinforces what we do, as well as the information we have available to help them become, a full-fledged WWTer and be able to gain access to all that information. So I think that it does fit really well. It's pretty exciting. And then, as we see it evolve to what you said of adding in the agents and being able to orchestrate things to help assist us in getting our job done is a pretty exciting future.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that we're doing. We're starting with internal, right? Because creating a quote, I think, is a long-term goal that is very difficult. But when we think about internal use cases, we have a large services organization that runs on projects, right? There's opportunities to use this agent to create some of those projects, to create some of the executive briefings that we do. We do a lot of events here, and we have tools that allow all those things to happen. The cool thing about the agents approach is we can basically train the AI on top of these APIs that already exist, and then the AI becomes the orchestration layer, that gets basically all the connected pieces together into a user experience that's different than what you can get out of just normal traditional UX.
Yeah.
But as we think about moving forward into that assistant mindset, it's going to require a different approach to how we interact with LLMs, because today we're in a lot of cases just kind of standardizing on GPT-4 or 4.0, but realizing that when it comes down to certain tasks, so whether we're talking about multimodal tasks or text summarization or function calling, we have LLMs that are, coming out that are fine-tuned for those specific tasks, right? And so I think the future is going to be a mix of, these cloud-hosted LLMs and maybe even LLMs or SLMs that are hosted, on-premise or potentially hosted on the device itself.
Right.
And, thankfully, we're in a position where we have, the ATC and the AI Proving Ground. We're actually, going to be getting an environment this week that gives us access to experiment with a lot of these local models, directly and understand how they scale and how, we can interact with some of these agent frameworks, within our local environment. So that's an exciting time, and I think a lot of that wouldn't have been possible, back in June of last year.
No.
Back when I think it was still like GPT-2 at that point.
I don't remember, but yeah. I think, to that point, first, I think that it's pretty amazing that we have the ability to use both cloud models from different places, as well as, use the ATC Proving Ground to try out things and potentially say this is a better suited task for something locally, either to optimize cost, performance, or overall functionality. The other thing that we're kind of grappling with is we're branding our internal AI assistant, but we'll have other AI assistants embedded in other places. So Copilot with our Microsoft suite. We've got some stuff that we'll be buying in a contract lifecycle management system or in Salesforce. So even in that ecosystem of assistants, it's figuring out now the positioning and the training or the education of the user of, hey, if I'm in Outlook, for example, and I'm using something, do I go to Adam or do I do this? Or can we start to figure out how to actually integrate those together and bring the best of both? Ideally in a situation where they don't have to think cognitively, I go here or here, but we can make it available to flow through those things. That, I think, is going to be one of the more interesting challenges coming forward as well, since it's going to be embedded everywhere. How do you make it so that it's embedded and integrated well, like
with third-party tools?
With third-party tools,
because it's a good example where we are not going to recreate that functionality, and do it better than Microsoft or Salesforce or any of our partners might be able to do. So how do we integrate with those capabilities, basically bidirectionally, right? Like, so bringing in some of those capabilities into Adam, and so if somebody's interacting with Adam and they have a question about our sales pipeline, right? We want to be able to, for example, use Einstein, right? Pull Einstein in and have Einstein help with the answer to that question. But then vice versa, if you're out there, in one of those third-party tools and you have a question or a task that Adam can help with, the hope is that we can kind of push that functionality and integrate it out into those tools.
WWT GPT, which we have recently rebranded as Adam AI at WWT, is a remarkable example of how you can leverage AI to create value for customers and partners, and how we embrace a culture of innovation and collaboration. A few of the key takeaways from my end. First, experimentation and prototyping are essential for finding the right problem to solve. Data management and security are critical for ensuring the quality and privacy of the information that powers the AI system. And finally, search and personalization are key features that enable the AI system to provide relevant and customized responses to the user's queries and needs. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to tune in to our next episode, when we'll talk about the challenges and journey of building the RFP Assistant, another AI-powered product we've built and deployed to help scale our RFP response team.